Have you ever experienced a DLC for a game that's so powerful, so potent in how it utilizes not only the combat, the script, the narrative design, but how it also incorporates itself into the body of the base game? I'm talking about none other than the DLC for Bloodborne, The Old Hunters. This DLC is charismatic, beautiful, even dark and morbid at points in the way that it carries itself throughout the main story of Bloodborne. Bloodborne's base game and DLC both tell a horrific and depressing story about just how far some types of experimentation will go. What's going on, you guys? It's your Huggable Hipster here, and welcome back to Soulsborne Academy. Don't mind the hunter in the corner, they're just here for your protection. In today's video, I'm going to go over why Bloodborne's DLC, The Old Hunters, is probably the best DLC you'll ever play. There's a lot of things that make a story fantastic in a video game, right? Having a problem, being able to solve it, and then solving said problem. Having different side quests or different side stories that add to a larger story. Understanding characters' motives. Understanding why things are the way they are within the world. World building. Understanding the political climate of the story that you are in. There's a lot of things that make a story fantastic. Sometimes a story can take gruesome turns, and gruesome is just the tip of the iceberg with Bloodborne's Old Hunters DLC. The entire game of Bloodborne is surrounded by experiments. Experiments on the old blood, experiments on women, experiments just on anything that the healing church can get their hands on. Now, there was an article that I will have down in the description below that explains the difference between lore and story beautifully. It states here that first, let's define lore. What's the difference between lore and story? Why do we say Souls lore and not Souls story? Well, in the case of From Software's action RPGs, the story is usually pretty bare bones, the actual series of events we partake in. It's the story of the chosen undead leaving the asylum and succeeding Lord Gwyn. It's the story of the good hunter arriving in Yharnam and uncovering the mystery of the city's mysterious miracle cure and curse. But there's a whole heap of non-immediate world building and detail that informs our experience. That is lore, the background detail, the context, and the flavor. Without the hints, implications, names, and locations imparted to us, these games would be pretty bare. Again, go check out that article. It's fantastic. Now, again, this is something that was mentioned in the article that I read, but it's something that I echo as well, so I am going to say here. No theory on Bloodborne, no theory on any Souls or Souls-like games or Soulsborne is going to be the same, and it's going to differ from person to person who plays and experiences the game Bloodborne. So what my theory is and how I approach the game and its DLC is going to be entirely different to the next person. So when obviously I say that this is probably the best DLC you're ever going to play in any game, that is of course an opinion. Don't take my words as facts. Take them as pieces of information that you can utilize in order to come up with your own viewpoint on something. But the lore isn't the only thing that really brings the Bloodborne's DLC, The Old Hunters, to rise to the occasion. One of the only DLCs from a game that I've seen that continues a game's story quite effortlessly. And not only that, it provides backstory that the main story needs quite desperately. Going into the Old Hunters DLC, you were exploring the history of the hunters. You were exploring the origins of the deadly beast plague that is in the base game. And you're doing it all through a realm where past hunters are trapped. This dives into so many of the secrets of Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church. It continues stories and little plot points very beautifully. I say this all, but at the end of the day, you would have to read the item descriptions, some of the notes, and interact with the NPCs to even know the story. And that is something of where if you're mainlining the story and you're not bothering to read the item descriptions or interact with a lot of things in the game, you won't get half or even any of the story at all for the most part. And if you're only in it to beat the bosses, that's completely fine, but you are missing out on a world of an entire story and experience of a game by only just mainlining and seeing the bosses. Just keep that in mind. This game has concepts of misogyny. This game has concepts of understanding your depression, understanding your brain and what it is telling you. I mean, for crying out loud, you have a boss called the amygdala. I mean, you know, it gets incredibly psychologically deep. Ooh, amygdala, you want to say amygdala. Shut up. I know From Software wanted to be a little edgy with that decision by making us pronounce it amygdala, but you will never catch me pronouncing it amygdala. It's just always amygdala. That's the way it's pronounced. That's the way it should be. That's the way it sounds. Just, oh my god. From Ludwig the Holy Blade, to Lawrence the First Vicar, to Lady Maria the Astral Clockwork Tower, to Orphan of Cause. Each one of these bosses is incredibly crucial, not just in the way that you fight them, but in the way they are represented in the story of Bloodborne as a whole, not just the DLC. These bosses in this DLC go so much deeper than just being bosses in a DLC. They are a part of the entire game, the entire story that is Bloodborne. Eldritch knowledge is known for granting eyes on the inside of the head. So when you think about it, eyes are knowledge. Why do you think that during most of the game, if your insight is at a very high level, you start to see things that you were not meant to see normally if your insight is lower? The way that I perceive insight throughout the game of Bloodborne is that if your insight is higher, you are seeing things. You have an awareness about you throughout the entirety of the game. You are more susceptible to things seeing you, and you are seeing them. This is also the philosophy and psychology that I'm talking about that is implemented throughout the entire game, not just the DLC. Now, I am guessing there were hunters that worked for Byrgenwerth because the Hunter's Nightmare is a direct result of the nightmare and the violence and experimentation that was done in the fishing hamlet. So, now there are two ways that the stories can connect, where you have the Great Ones and the use of blood. Some might say it's different stories. I say it's different stories that are within the same universe that can coalesce together, if you will. You have one part of the story that deals with two competing different ways of thinking, right? You have one part of where all the characters are like, no, we want to be able to reach a higher plane of existence through insight, through thought. And they take that a little bit too far. When you get into the DLC, you see mental patients who have gone a little bit too far deep into thought and too far in trying to ascend through thought. But then you have the old blood, which that turns people into beasts, and which is why hunters were created to begin with, because they needed to be able to quell the pandemic as it was of all of these beasts and to be able to manage the situation as best as possible. It's also kind of amazing how the umbilical cord, to an extent, is utilized as a communication with the higher-ups, as it were, which is another video entirely. I can go on about discussing the umbilical cords and their usage within Bloodborne. Another really cool thing about this game is that it has a callback to Dark Souls that I don't think you guys noticed. If you did notice it, I'm not saying that you guys might not have noticed it. I'm just saying that it's there if you didn't notice it. There are such similarities between Guinevere from Dark Souls 1 and Rom the Vacuous Spider. As soon as you kill Guinevere in Dark Souls 1 Remastered, you see Anor Londo for what it truly is. You see its nature, you see its bleak, desperate, just, oh my god, what did I enter into nature? As soon as you kill Rom, the curtain is lifted, everything, you see it for what it is. You don't have the eyes anymore of Rom the Vacuous Spider to give you the world that you saw before. That's why you have that beautiful cutscene with the blood moon. That's why whenever you go back into the hunter's dream, it is different than when you first entered in, and so is the rest of the game, by the way. The world of the DLC and the world of the old hunter is showing you the world for what it is. It's showing you the nightmare redone all over and over and over and over again, like a broken record. It's just a tape that's going on loop, and I think the best part about the DLC is that it enhances what the base game is telling the player. It's basically telling you the story of what the Great Ones are, of how people tried to get to that and they failed. And then they tell you the backstory of the old hunters. They're telling you how these hunters from Byrgenwerth College went in to try and see, oh my god, there's a great one here. There's something that we need to gain its knowledge. We need it for us to be able to grant eyes, to be able to gain insight into the world, for us to be able to gain ascension. And what happened? They got greedy. They got power hungry. And they unfortunately killed so many within the fishing hamlet. For me, I know that the message I got from this game's DLC and the base game of Bloodborne as well is that these characters, as they were never truly satisfied with what they are. They were always looking for something more so to become special, to be greater than. Religion plays a huge part in the game's story. There's a lot of mysticism. There's a lot of philosophy and so much psychology that goes into this entire game and its DLC. The DLC of Bloodborne, when we get to the very end and we have to kill off the soul, basically, of Orphan of Cause to extinguish the nightmare, does that mean that the cycle continues, or the nightmare is done, it's completed? When you go back into the hunter's dream after you have killed Orphan of Cause, you will almost get this sigh of relief from the doll. And I don't know whether or not that's a sigh of relief that the nightmare is over, or that that cycle is over for now. But there's so many debates and thoughts on this entire game. I haven't even covered the Formless Odin yet. There's so many different things that you can dive into. There's so many different theories and schools of thought. Like, the game and its DLC are just one of pure speculation, besides a few points that are cemented in truth of what the story is. Remember, I said story and lore completely different. Again, check out that article. It will be down in the description below, and give the person who wrote it a lot of love. It's all of the lore, all of the speculation, all of these things that I covered in today's video. This is why the Old Hunters DLC is probably one of the best DLCs I've ever played. But that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you all like my face and what I do, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell down below. May you find your worth in the waking world, dear hunter, and I will see you all in the next one. Umbasa.